It is Sunday morning, and we are starting about 8 minutes late, and it's because I had some weird technical issues on my side. I couldn't sign into our restreaming platform. I tried numerous different browsers, I tried numerous different things, and then finally I'm like, well, I'm just going to tell Andrew. And then Andrew's like, well, fuck it, let's just switch over to Zoom. And that was a great idea. I'm like, I'll try one more time. Tried one more time. Bam, we're in. And it's the shit like that really makes me remember not to get all worked up, because often that's what happens. It's kind of like that expression, it's always the last place you look for it. Well, obviously, because you're not going to keep looking for it after you find it, right? But the point is just to keep going, right? It's like that other expression that 99% of people fail just before, or quit just before they would have succeeded. That's a dickish thing to say. And I know, as an entrepreneur who chewed on that forever, I'm just like, fuck, because you never know, right? You never know when that might be. And the whole point is to just not quit. It's just to keep going, just to keep going, but to remember that a lot of that drag, a lot of the frustration, a lot of the need for it to happen faster, that all comes down from a lack of alignment with who you are and where you are now, right? So the practice is to keep going, to set a direction, but not to need to get to that direction, not to weigh yourself down on the journey, but rather just to have a journey.
Because you don't know how quick it's going to change as you're going, as you keep going. Like, you don't know what's around the next corner, when you're feeling certain ways. And oh man, dude, like the amount, and it's been it's been an interesting week of just unraveling stuff, and I don't even know what that means, because as I start, thinking about that, I'm like, it's not really there if I'm not focusing on it or paying attention to it. And then it's like, okay, I'm here and we're just chatting and we're just talking. And that's just it. And it's so funny how quick we can go back and forth, and how much we can think of life as a test. Like it's a test. Like every situation is a test. And I had like a build up to this call this morning, and then it hit me. And I'm like, because almost pretty much everything I feel like I've gotten on or gotten into, like I think of as a test, kind of like, I hope this goes well. I hope this call goes well. What the fuck does that mean? What does that mean? There's no thing for that to be. It's just, and part of me is like, is it just me wanting to stay in control? Is going well me staying in control and me maintaining some perspective, as if that's a thing that can even happen? Because I've like tried to, and then here I go back into the stuff I feel like I've been going through. But it's applicable. It's what's happening right now, and this is what's playing out. I didn't keep thinking about it for it to continue to pop out, but how much I've tried to maintain control of perception, of my perception, of how people fucking see me, and protect it, and fucking protect it as if there's anything to protect. And how seriously I've taken myself. And I have gotten to a point, like, kind of like you're saying, where it's like, am I going to do this forever? Am I gonna fucking do this shit? Am I gonna keep myself at bay forever? Am I gonna hide whatever the fuck happens when I let myself go, like, forever? Like, I can't anymore. I can't. Like, it's like I've tried all the ways to do that, and like actually figured out quite a few, quite a few ways. And I'm not saying it's like, realize all your hopes and dreams to realize it doesn't matter. But like, I've tried a lot of ways to feel better and like protect this thing, like and keep it under control, keep myself under control in this fucking box of my ability to control it. Like, And as I'm talking, I'm like, "What am I even saying right now? Like, how am I control what exactly? Control just control my perception, my own perception? Is that what I'm trying to control or keep in mind?" And yeah, I'll stop
It's a really
now.
good question. That's a great question. It's kind of like what you were saying earlier. It's like, how other people perceive me, but it was never other people perceiving you. It's how you perceive you. So what you're really protecting is your idea of yourself, the one that makes you feel good. And then we use other people to validate that idea. Oh, yep, nope, they're agreeing with it. Therefore, it must be true. Now I feel better. Right. But it's always our idea of ourself. That's what we're trying to control, who we are. We're trying to control who we are, which is fucking ridiculous. And if you think about it, the most oppressive thing you could do to yourself. It's like ongoing pressure and stress all the time to try and be something other than the thing that's thinking it can be something, which is fucking hilarious. It's like trying to take the limitless and make it the limited. And we do it all the time. Why can't I fit in this box? Why can't I fit in this box? I'm going to fit in that box. I'm going to fit in that box. Why is it so constraining? Need a better box. It's like, let go of the fucking box. But it really just comes down to that feeling that I can control who I am and therefore my life accordingly. I can feel good. I can feel better. I can feel valuable. I can feel like I'm getting somewhere. I can feel more. All of those things, but they only happen if I'm thinking about myself. They all depend on me thinking about myself. And the alternative is to just be what I am. And that's it, right? And that is what we don't understand. It's like, but if I'm not trying to get somewhere, how am I going to get anywhere? It's like, well, you got here, and you've gotten everywhere else. It's not from needing to get somewhere, it's through living. Like you are life and movement. You're going to get places. Things are going to happen. Shit's going to keep going. Change is going to take place. You don't have to be in there going, but I need to change. It's already happening. And what we're really saying is, but I need to change in a way that I understand and feel comfortable with. And that's not really change, is it?
Fucking A, dude, not at all. Like, oh, I'm gonna change. It's like the fucking ice bath shit. Like, I'm gonna change into the person that does ice baths because I want to be that person. I want to be that type of person. I don't know what the fuck kind of person I want to be. And the amount of ways that I've tried and I've thought back because this week, the whole social media thing has been hitting me really hard in a lot of different ways, and how that's been sort of, my most recent idea and maybe the biggest one I've ever had or maintained. And I was thinking, like, fuck, I wish, like, part of me wishes it never happened. Like, part of me wishes I went back 3.5 years and, like, I didn't. And I know that's just like, because I have this perception now that, like, and it was all internal. And that's the fucking craziest thing is it was all internal, which is like, ugh, like so jarring in so many ways because it just puts in front of me how much it's always just been internal, and I've always just been alone in that perception. And how, 3.5 years ago, it was other shit. It was other shit I looked to to feel good. It was like, things I had done, which school I went to, how I, was how even fucking like stuff I wasn't afraid of doing. That too, like things I jumped into and then started feeling good about because I have all of these like pent up things, and I've been looking at fucking open mic comedy places in New York to go to just to be like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, am I gonna do this shit my whole life? Like, am I gonna fucking hide my whole goddamn life behind some fucking idea or perception? Like, keep myself in control, like out of the face of fucking judgment, and like keep that from everything and like all everything that I am. Like, am I gonna do that just because I feel like I feel comfortable with hiding it? Like, am I really gonna fucking do that? And so I don't know what I was thinking or saying before the comedy thing, but like, what the fuck, man? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's jarring, isn't it? Just all of a sudden, you're just like, "Holy fucking shit, have I actually been doing anything for me?" And the answer is yes. The whole time, yes, but within the environment that you perceived, right? That's the whole point. What we've been saying is that perception's on a scale or on a spectrum. Like, it's not just that there are infinite perceptions. There are really divisive perceptions and then less so, right? And that's what's been changing is that your perception, how divisive your perception is, how focused you are on yourself, creates an environment where you have to adapt to what you're divided from. Right? You have to set goals. You have to establish some idea of yourself. You have to compete. You have to compare. You have to go through this environment where you're protecting yourself, where you're trying to maintain some kind of a mask or some kind of a persona that's going to help you facilitate movement through society. And so everything that you've ever done, everything I've ever done was in response to the environment that I perceived myself to be in, which was divided and scary and didn't give a fuck about me. And all that's changed is that your perception is less divisive. You've stopped focusing so much on the idea of yourself. And so now the environment shifted. All of a sudden you're like, well, there's no fucking threats around. Like I feel like I've been swatting at goddamn shadows, and it's because they look like shadows now. Before they looked like straight up fucking real monsters. And it's just because of how you perceive them. So you can't judge anything that you've gone through to get here because it's through the path of division. It's through the path of duality that one can recognize unity. One can recognize who they are underneath all that fucking noise. Right. But there's no other way. There's no other way. It's funny because you're like, I invested in the social media thing, more than anything else. Baseball, high school, how women perceived you, how everyone perceived all of these things we've invested in over time. Why? Well, because we were trying to survive in a world that we felt threatened by. And now all of a sudden we're perceiving the world differently, not because we're trying to perceive the world differently, but because the root of the division is starting to fade away, which is the focus on that fiction of you. And so all of a sudden the threats are gone. All of a sudden the idea that you can be more or less is starting to disappear. And what you're left with is, a very light, albeit jarring feeling because you feel like you've never lived freely, but you've lived as freely as you could according to the perception that you were growing through. Same is true now. And the real trick is to understand that it's not about not thinking about things that make you feel good or bad. That's going to happen. That's just what your brain does, right? It's not about that whatsoever. It's just about consistently remaining in that state where you remember, right. But that's not the truth. I just need to keep going, right? Like, give you an example. I love my cat. I love playing with my cat. I love coming home to see my cat. I've discussed this recently in my trip back from the States where it was like, I want to get home. Why does it take so fucking long? That entirely came from the fact that I love to see my cat. It feels great. And he's great to play with and hang with. And it's just a wonderful feeling of feeling good. And so I have this thought in my head when I get home, I'm gonna see my cat. That's gonna feel awesome. Is that a bad thing? No. Does it have a consequence? Absolutely. Absolutely, it has a consequence, right? And so I treat it lightly. I treat it lightly. I know that life is duality. It's not about avoiding one side or the other. It's about recognizing them and being aware of them as they have their little interplay, right? So even now, like you're going to build more ideas of yourself. You can't help it. Your brain does it. It's what it does. Like you went to Wing Chun. You're going to have an idea of yourself as not being very good at Wing Chun. And if you keep doing Wing Chun, your idea is going to be, well, I'm getting better at Wing Chun. But then you got to keep that shit in line, right? You got to watch that shit for what it is. It's kind of like when somebody asked Bruce Lee, well, if I were to ask you, are you good at martial arts? What would you say? And he's like, well, if I said yes, you'd think I'm bragging. But if I said no, you'd know I'm lying. right? And so that's kind of the point, is that there's no answer that's ever going to satisfy anyone, including yourself. That doesn't mean you're not going to go through them. It's just treating them lightly. It's just treating them lightly and then doing what the fuck you want here. But, understanding that that urge to feel better becomes a trap, right? It changes everything you do, because then all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to do this thing that's terrifying and really difficult. And I'm probably not going to enjoy it for the first little while. And how often have you been willing to do that in your life? Where you're like, I'm going to do this thing that doesn't immediately make me feel better about myself. And I'm going to stick it out because I see value in it, despite my brain going, but I want to feel better. We've been giving into that temptation our whole life. And now all of a sudden we can go, that's hard, grueling, challenging, and probably going to change me as a person. Let's fucking do it. As opposed to, that's going to make me feel better.
Oh, and it's such a fucking fragile thing, like, what what's gonna make me feel better, as if I even know that, because I know I've been trying to keep things at bay for fucking so much of my life, and guess what? It doesn't feel good at all. It feels pretty fucking brutal most of the time, but it's like a subdued, underlying, sort of constant nagging, that, like, judgment that's just swelling, and it's swelling more and more and more, to the point I'm like, now it's like fucking, it can't, like, I can't keep it off anymore. It's, like, way too in my face, and the ideas that, going back and forth of ideas, it's like I'm almost s and again, it's God, I don't even know how to express this, because it's like I don't have as many ideas, but at the same time, I do, almost. Whatever that means, because 'cause I'm not like, I'm so quick to catch now. If I ever start feeling good about any idea of myself, I'm so quick to, like, catch it, and I'm aware of that, but the ones that make me feel like a bag of shit, like, I'm less inclined to catch, almost like I deserve it, because I am a piece of shit. As I've been telling myself for a long ass time, and
And the universe come down to a single point of focus. See, that's the point. Like, they're both true. You understand? Like, they're both true, that you are a flawed, quote unquote, human being and absolutely perfect. That you are, you know, limited in how much you can ever know entirely, but yet you are the entire intelligence of the universe focused down to a single point. Like, they're both true. That's the whole thing. Like, you can tell yourself any story. You can tell yourself any story, and there's an ounce of truth to it. It's not the whole story. That's the point. That's why you just want to get to a certain point and settle on it. Right? Like, you have spent so long trying to feel good that in order to get out of that habit, you're deliberately making yourself feel like a bag of shit. And the trick is to not make yourself feel anything, is to just feel what you're feeling. Right? Like, sometimes you're going to feel good. The question is why. If there's a why, abandon that shit. Right? And it's just because the why immediately becomes a fear. Right? If I have a reason for why I feel good, I have something I need to protect. Right? Because I want to feel good. Whereas if I don't have a reason, if I'm just here and I feel, and how I feel is really determined by me. Not that I can control what I'm feeling, but that I have a response to how I'm feeling. See, I can be angry and be happy about being angry. I can be sad and grateful for that sadness. We forget that. We forget that we have such an infinite spectrum of response to our feelings. Instead, we just try to control our feelings. Right? We try to control what we're feeling. I want to feel good all the time, and that creates a tunnel vision instead of I am feeling. I am feeling, and those feelings change. But It's the teeter-totter, man. As soon as you're chasing feeling good, feeling bad is just fucking coming up on your rear, man, like a threat. And that's what we've lived in forever is that teeter-totter, that ebb and that flow of trying to get to goodness and then running away from badness and doing all that shit instead of just going, "Well, I'm just here." And none of it's good or bad. It's just what it is. And my response to it is really the important part. But as long as my response to it is coming from a place of fragility, as long as I'm coming from a place where I need to feel a certain way, I need to, and if I don't feel that way, it means something about me. Like it's just a bottomless fucking pit. It's a bottomless pit where you're always chasing your tail, trying to feel better and creating the feeling of being afraid of feeling worse, which makes you feel worse. It's just a fucking vicious loop. And the alternative is just to feel what you're feeling. Like right now, it's kind of like I always say, it's like, how you doing? I'm doing. Everything else is an opinion, an irrelevant opinion, right? And it is. That doesn't mean I don't have those opinions because I like having opinions, right? It's just how seriously am I taking those opinions? Am I taking those opinions as truth? Am I taking my preferences as reality, as who I am? Or am I just holding them lightly because I can? Because they're another tool in the toolbox, because I have the entirety of my reality to be. Right. It's really what it is. Just trying to control who I am, man. I'm trying to make it an idea. And with that comes all of the fucking back and forth that goes with that idea. Instead of recognizing, oh yeah, the back and forth will always be a part of the idea. And I can fuck with the ideas and realize the back and forth is going to happen and not get involved. But it's awareness. It really is just being aware of how all of this shit works while you're dancing through it. Like as you're walking through a grocery store and you see somebody, I don't know, wearing something ridiculous, and you do that knee-jerk reaction of being human, or like, and then you kind of make a little snide comment like, "Oh my, that's a bold choice," that kind of thing. That's all judgment, right? That's all judgment, and you can have a little laugh. But to actually think that that person is somehow less than you is to take that judgment and make it about you instead of just going, "That was kind of a funny laugh." That was a good moment of levity, and then let it go as not being real. Right? And that's the point, is to treat all of this lightly, to use it without getting entrapped by it. But the only way to do that is to really look at it. And when you look at it long enough, eventually you hit that wall where you're like, oh fuck, it never works. It never works. And I'm just beating my head against this fucking wall, trying to make an idea of me actually fulfilling, despite the fact that the idea of me always divides me.
Always, because it's always in relativity to something or someone else. And one of the last things you said, it's so funny because I went through this sort of loop in my head where I was like, oh, I want to have a point about that. And then I tried to hold on. And then I was like, you know what? I always try and hold on to stuff all the time, perceptions, ideas, things. And now I'm going through and like, I don't care if it goes away. Like, if that thought runs away, I'll still be on the call. There's no right. This isn't a fucking test. It's not a thing that I have to fucking dance like a monkey for and do it right. What for myself? For myself. Like that's what I'm I'm oh god, dude. And like I did not realize how much pent up shit. Like mm,
Yeah, you've been unloading a lot of this shit. Well, for 2 years. I mean, that's all we've been doing. But this is all the work that we've ever done in questioning everything. You understand, right? Like, this is exactly where it leads eventually. If you just keep going, eventually it comes to this point where it's just you. That's why everybody stops. They settle on a belief, they settle on some kind of idea of themselves, right? And their relationship to God or source or whatever the fuck is making them feel comfortable. And the reason is because the inevitable end to just being aware of how all of this shit interplays is to become disillusioned by it. to actually just end up in reality. This is why psychedelics are such a trip for people, right? It's because what do? They increase your processing power. Right. So all of a sudden, shit that you were like distracting yourself through so you didn't have to see the whole picture, you can't distract yourself from. So all of a sudden you come out the other side of a psychedelic experience, you're like, holy shit, life isn't what I thought it was at all. And it's always been right in front of you. It's just that you've been so distracted that you're processing through mud. Right. And so all of a sudden the mud's gone and you're processing, but you always have that capacity in just abandoning the mud or abandoning the fog or abandoning the fucking bullshit, the illusion. But we spend so much of our time thinking about and processing shit based on the illusion that we believe in that there's no space left to process reality. That's why it feels like we wake up out of a fog. We were talking about this the other day. Because I don't think of my thoughts as being personal, I'm able to see the structure of them far easier. And it's just because I recognize, oh, yeah, that's just my brain trying to figure out where I am in whatever spectrum it's fucking processing at the time, because life is infinite spectrums. Right? As soon as you know that, though, you're like, oh, that's it. Oh, wow. And you just stop reacting to them because you know they're not about you. They might be about a part of you, and they might be a part of your behavior. They might be a perception of you, but that's not you in your entirety. And thought can never take in all of you. That's why you have to really increase that processing power to even get a fucking glimpse. It's because otherwise you're just looking through a tiniest pinhole. And that pinhole is only afforded to you according to the fucking giant wall of your own shit that you've put there. But as Krishnamurti was saying, to see the window as distorted, as foggy, and to just look at the window is what clears it, right? That's what clears it. You can't try to get rid of the fog. You can't try to get rid of the illusion. You can just look at it. You can look at it without preference, without judgment. And in that looking, an insight happens. But it's in the looking, not in the trying to get somewhere, not in the trying to fix it, just in the looking, allowing yourself to become more aware of what you are.
Because so much like trying to get somewhere, trying to become something, trying to become more is always in relativity. Like it's always relative to something else. And when you start to realize that there isn't something to measure yourself against, it's like you realize that all the shit that you think is going on in the world, other people, things that other people are doing or dealing with, you realize, no, all the shit is your own shit. Like it's like, oh God, I don't even like, I don't know how to say this either. I don't even know what this is, but like, as much as, oh fuck, is that like another way to feel better? The thought that like everyone's going through shit. Everyone's going through shit. Like, I'm not saying that it's not, but it's, I guess, recognize like both and neither. Cause if no one else is going through shit, like, I guess it's both and neither, right? It's like, it's just me going through shit. It's all I know. I don't know anyone else's shit so much because all I know is my response. Like, all I know is my, if someone were to fucking do something that I would judge myself for and I respond in judgment, that's my own response. That's my own shit getting expressed. And so everyone's got their own shit that they're expressing or internalizing. They're just expressing or internalizing themselves. I'm only ever expressing or internalizing my own shit. And so it's both and neither because all I know is my own shit. But in knowing myself, I know everyone because I know my own responses and my own judgments. And so all of a sudden, all those things that I'm worried about or afraid of, because I know so clearly and that it's all just my own shit that I'm expressing outwardly, even if I'm, the sort of scoff at someone's whatever, how they're living their life, whatever that means, is just me expressing my own stuff. And so then I can see it in everyone, and not out of judgment, because me fucking doing any sort of judgment about that is deflecting, is assuming that I'm not alone, that it's not just me. And so even assumptions that other people should be different, but then in that, it's recognizing that that behavior is my behavior. And that's where I get your sort of tenacity with things and like bluntness with things, because you're straight up just talking to yourself, seeing that they're expressing what you would express in the same situation. And so all the fucking judgment that I'd be afraid of is just my own judgment. Because again, like someone does something that maybe I would judge myself for, and it almost makes me feel less alone because they're expressing something, and it like allows me to see that other people are doing that stuff, and yet I'm trying to hide that stuff. I'm trying to hide the mishaps, the imperfections, the things, just to fucking, God, so fucking selfish, just to make myself feel better. Like, holy Christ. Oh my God.
Well, don't judge yourself for it. That's
I know.
that's still trying to make yourself feel better. Again, this is why I laugh as often as I do. But this is a good conversation because you can't help anyone. There's no one to help. There's no one to save. There's no one to save, because what are we trying to save them from? Themselves? That's arrogant as fuck. But like I was saying to you, if you recognize that perception, although it seems infinite and random, does exist on a spectrum from divisive to unifying, then you start to recognize that a big part of the quote unquote problem, it's not really a problem, but a big part of the process that we're going through right now is that march through a divisive perception to the inevitable outcome of disillusionment. And so this conversation is a part of that on the collective level. This podcast is a part of that on the collective level. That's what this conversation has always been, has been a march through all the fucking dualistic perceptions to the inevitable conclusion of, oh fuck, they're all connected. Oh my God. Ah. And that's pretty much it. Right. And that's why this is so encouraging to me, is because it's not about convincing anyone of anything. It's about being part of the changing environment. Because if you're always responding to a divisive environment, which is divisive according to the perception that you've invested in, and that environment isn't responding in the same divisive tone that you've invested in, all of a sudden you become aware of another option. And so all of a sudden your brain takes in more information, and new perceptions, less divisive perceptions, are suddenly available. And that's it. That's why I've said to you since the very beginning, I'm just here to shoot the shit. I'm just here to talk for as long as you want to. And I mean that for everybody, because you're doing the work. I'm not doing the work. I'm just not giving you anything divisive to hold on to. I'm just a different environment than you're used to. And that's why the podcast is a different environment than people are used to. And there's a bunch of people watching right now and listening to this right now. And each and every one of them, to some degree, depends how long you've listened to the podcast, has felt that lack of weight, or at least a lessening of the weight. Why? Is it because we've taught them anything? No. It's because we've been talking about our own weight. We've been talking about the nature of it, where it comes from, how it feels, how we deal with it. We've expressed what we are going through the process without any judgment of that. And the less judgment there is of you going through the process, the more your environment changes, the less divisive it becomes. And that's why everybody's experiencing this. That's what they experience at the retreats, is an environment where there's almost no division. And any division is playful. Hey, let's play a game of pool. Wink, wink. Nobody gives a shit who wins. Hey, let's go play shuffleboard. Nobody gives a shit who wins. Hey, let's do karaoke. Nobody gives a shit about your performance or their performance, right? That's all it is. It's not that you can't. It's just that nobody's sitting there going, no, but that's important. It's important how well I'm doing. Nobody's feeding that. Why? Because we recognize it from our own work. We are the changing environment. We are the changing environment. We forget that because we're so busy focused on ourselves, but there is no self separate from everyone else. So we are like, is it just me going through my shit? What do you mean? You know, this is exactly what Carl Jung was talking about in the collective unconscious, like the collective mentality that we learn. We are in a reality that reflects the divisiveness of our own perception of ourselves and have for generations. And as that perception of ourselves starts to change, or rather, starts to become a little less serious, reality around us will start to reflect that. But there's no way to go out and tell someone, stop being stop being so divisive, because that's divisive. You can't go to somebody and saying, you're being egotistical, without sounding a bit egotistical, right? But it's not in avoiding that. It's in recognizing it. It's in recognizing that as long as you are participating in concepts, identity, names, all that shit, you are still participating in division. You're still participating in duality. And that is not a bad thing. Unless you start taking it so seriously, you forget that that idea that you're divided from everybody else isn't reality. And it's addictive. That's the point. It's addictive to feel like you're in control. It's addictive to feel like you're getting better, like you're doing something, like you're making change, like things are going your way. It's addictive. And that's it. It's just addictive. The alternative is to accept you don't know and focus on where you are. And oddly enough, as with any type of mastery, that is how you get the most bang for your buck. The most milk for the least moo. Is because you're actually involved with what you're doing. That's it. That's all there is to this. And that's why, again, I enjoy this. That said, before we continue on with this episode, because we did promise that we would do this today, the ticket for our California mini retreat has been won. The contest has been won by Kevin Austin. Kevin, fucking great video, man. We thank you for putting that out there. We appreciate everybody's entries. We really appreciate it because it makes a ripple in the same way that we're talking about right here, because it takes guts, it takes courage to make a social media video, to put yourself out there. It takes a lot in terms of faith in yourself to just express yourself and hope for the best. Not even hope for the best, but just express yourself and throw it out there like a message in the bottle. And so everybody who entered the contest, we really appreciate it, because you make ripples. You're making ripples all the time, but in this case, you made ripples and told people about Dualistic Unity. And so we really appreciate that, because again, we're just here. And since we're just here, we're not here to convince anyone of anything. This is one of the things I love about this podcast. We don't follow any of the rules. We don't have a certain niche. We don't target a certain audience. We don't have a target market. Like, we have no specific message. It is as organic and open and almost amateurish as you can get. And yet the quality of the fucking conversations through the roof. And yet, if anybody superficial were to come to the podcast, they'd go, oh, where's the production value? Why isn't there any music at the beginning of the episode? Why don't they do a better job of organizing it? There would be so much in terms of expectation and frustration. And that's exactly why the podcast is a diamond in the rough. You have to be already going through the shit to be willing to take a chance on it. That's why it's powerful. That's why it exists. So that said, want to give a shout out to Kevin one more time. Fucking awesome job, man. There are still a few tickets left for the California mini retreat. Not that many. I really do recommend that you join us for this retreat if you are on the West Coast, anywhere near California, because it's going to be dope. It's going to be great. We're on Big Bear Lake. It is beautiful out there. So definitely join us. There's a few bunks left, and there's a king size bed on the top floor. That floor is going to be fucking awesome. Admittedly, there's 5 beds all shared within this massive room. So everybody's going to be able to sit up there and have their own little fucking slumber party at the end of the night. Hell, I might just drop up there and shoot the shit with everyone for a little bit, but it's going to be a dope place. So you can get that last king bed. I highly recommend it. Otherwise, the single bunks. And then Colorado. We are returning to our 420 friendly Colorado mini retreat location. We were here last year. Andrew went through the fucking underworld at our last at our last mini retreat in this location. And so I am excited about this because it is a triumphant return. You've gone through a lot of shit, man. It's just kind of funny. And the only reason I say it's kind of funny is because it just keeps getting better from here. Like from here, it's just finding your feet without the push and the pull. And isn't it so funny how much of our equilibrium, or what we consider to be equilibrium in life, is this idea that we're tethered to the future from the past, but to allow those two tethers to just disappear and to exist in the free floating reality that is the present moment, it takes some time. And so it's really helpful to be in an environment where you can just relax and nobody's feeding you that division. I remember very clearly at the last Colorado retreat when Andrew was going through his shit. Somebody came downstairs and like, Andrew's really going through the shit. And I'm like, all right, I'll go talk to him. I went upstairs, tapped him on the shoulder. You good? Or do you want to go back in? And he, without hesitation, went, I want to go back in. And it's because he was clearing shit out and he was aware of it at the time. After the fact, he's like, why did I do that? But it was necessary. And so I'm looking forward to returning to this awesome fucking cannabis friendly location with a much lighter Andrew, who's aware of the fact that he doesn't, in fact, have to take a fucking free dive into the underworld just to come back out and recognize that he didn't have to do that. But I guess that's the point, is that we go through it to recognize that we don't have to go through it anymore. We go through it so that way we can look at it for what it is, accept it, and actually move on rather than just cope with it, rather than just try to bury it. And so that's why these retreats are great. It's because if you're going through some shit, it's nice to be able to go through it when you're surrounded by people who are like, yep, that's what it's like. Do you want to play some pool? Would you like to just shoot the shit? How about a hug? That's why the retreat locations, that's why the retreats are so powerful. That's why all the groups, are powerful, is because everybody brings that intention to the table of being self-responsible and not adding any division to anybody else. Can you imagine the environment that creates for each and every person? It's fucking beautiful. It's beautiful. And all it takes is just a little bit of responsibility, a little bit of self-responsibility, and everything changes. I love that point. I really do. So that said, Colorado, that's where I was going with this. Tier 2 of Patreon is going to get access to the Colorado mini retreat today, as well as their $150 discount coupon code that will be posted on Patreon. I will do so after this show when we go into the Patreon groups later on. So keep an eye out for that. Do remember that Tier 3 already has early access to the Colorado mini retreat and a $350 discount. So if you are Tier 3, I would jump on that Colorado mini retreat right away before Tier 2 gets access to it, because they're a bunch of ravenous fiends. No, just kidding. That said, Colorado also has one thing that previous retreats have not had, which is the option to bring a guest. If you would like to share your bed, because they're all doubles or kings, then you can do that for an additional fee. It's not like a full ticket price. This is actually a really good way to save money. It's just enough for us to cover the food and substances and whatnot. But you can share your bed. So do keep in mind, and I have to say this, I cannot stress this enough. If you're going to bring somebody, make sure they listen to the podcast. I mean this with all my heart. If you're going to bring somebody, don't bring somebody who you've told about the podcast and they're really all about it. Don't bring somebody that you are trying to convince would love the podcast. Don't bring someone who isn't already listening to and discussing the podcast with you. Not you with them with you. And the reason is just because sometimes, and this happens all the time, it'd be like, oh, I know this person. They're going through a lot of shit. They would love the podcast. And they come to the podcast and they don't. And they don't. And why don't they? because they're going through a lot of shit. That's why. The podcast is not a cure-all. This is something that's really important to recognize. I know I've talked for like several minutes here. I'm going to pass it to you in a second. I promise. The podcast is not a cure-all. You actually have to do a certain amount of work in your life before this will ever be helpful to you. This is the reason that our Discord occasionally needs a fucking house cleaning. It's because people try to make other people feel better. Oh, you're going through, it's all going to be okay. You're strong. We're here for you. And all it does is it fosters this idea that they're not personally responsible. And then what happens? There's a giant fucking clusterfuck shortly after. And all of a sudden I have to step in and I have to say something when they're like, well, that doesn't seem like a nice thing to say. It's like, what made you think this was about being nice and not honest? This isn't about being nice. This isn't about making you feel better. This is about you working on your shit. This isn't about us working on your shit for you. And I mean that for the entire community. To anyone individually, it's about you. It has to be about you. It's the only way it works. So to take someone who's still wrapped up in the world of them and the idea of themselves and go listen to this podcast, it's going to cure all your fucking woes. It won't. It's going to cause a reaction at worst, or worse. It might make it fucking worse because they're going to come into it and go, I don't like any of this shit, and just create a judgment right off the bat. So what I'm saying is, if you're recommending the podcast, if you're bringing somebody to a retreat, use some discernment, not hope. And don't try to save anyone, but actually look at them and ask, would you benefit from an environment that reflects your mentality? Because if the mentality is divisive, if the mentality is everybody else has got to fix me, they're not going to dig that retreat. They're not. Because everybody at the retreat is going to remind them, it's on you. We are here, but we can't do the work for you. So that said, it's going to be amazing. Bring a guest. Just, again, use discernment. I love everybody, but, ask yourself, how much do you want to bring somebody to the retreat who's going to require everybody's attention to keep them buoyed? How much do you want to change that environment? You don't have to bring a guest either. It's just an option.
Oh yeah, fuck yeah! I'm excited for California. Very excited for California. And Kevin, congratulations on the fucking ticket. I am excited to hang with you, man, and it's making me laugh all week how much I had this sort of idea of fucking being a host of these retreats, despite maybe at every single retreat being the person who could most use the retreat. And I was just like holding that off. It's like, motherfucker, these retreats are kind of for you. You're not helping. And that fucking thought, like, I have so many thoughts about everything that you just said. I have no idea what's going to pop up and what's not. But the thought of like, fucking helping someone, dude, like how much we use that to feel better about how much I use that to feel better about myself, like straight up, absolutely. Holy shit, that is a way that, oh god, it's like, it's so brutal to see, to like start to, I don't know, recognize your behaviors more clearly and like be more honest with yourself. And like, holy fuck, there's a lot. And again, it's not, out of judgment. It's just out of recognition, because as soon as it's out of judgment, it's, back the same sort of thing, the same sort of like, now I'm feeling better about myself because I'm beating myself up for something instead of just fucking changing, instead of just stop doing that shit anymore. Stop thinking of this fucking podcast as something that I have to show up for and share certain fucking insights. This is not, it's not anything. It's more important that it's nothing that anyone thinks. It's more important that it's, low budget. And I love how, and again, this is maybe just my idea of Ray, that he's got this sort of like under the surface sort of plan going on that like he can't really express, because like I probably wouldn't get it. But like, there's a reason that we don't have the super high production value stuff, because there's things that stem from that. There's like fulfilling sort of thoughts, or even that, being nice. Absolutely. Because again, it's from being nice is your own need. When I'm nice, it's my own need being fulfilled, to feel good about myself, to be a nice person. And like, oh God, that one runs so deep, like this assumption on the teeter totter of like 50% of like honest, abrasive, frank, blunt to nice, comfortable, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, but at least it's like 51-49. It's at least like a little bit, right, Ray? Right? It's like a little bit. And it's like, how much is that taking away from you being yourself? How much is that you holding yourself to a standard? How much is that me trying to be something other than what I am, trying to be something? Again, straight up trying to be something. There's no spectrum that's preferential to fall upon. But anytime that you do, it's like, that's your idea, trying to fucking maintain some idea, trying to be liked. It's easier to be liked if you're super nice to everyone than if you're not. And like, you don't get that either. And you don't get any of those fucking sides of the spectrum. And so all of it is like, it can't cater to, and I like how I've kind of somehow swung through all the thoughts that I had during this. Funny how that plays out when you're not trying to hold on to fucking shit. And now it's like, all right, you got cocky and thought you were going to be able to hold on to that one, and there it is. And like the societal judgment, dude, like the amount of the just how much it's going on. But then I even wonder about that, is like, is it kind of my own judgment? And that's been such a, oh God, like one of the the parts of the retreats that I guess even till now I'm realizing that I haven't grasped, was just like how I'm not met with any judgment of anything, of any behavior whatsoever. And like, growing up in environments, I don't think I even like, I wouldn't think of it as judgmental. And yet, even if it's self-judgmental and self-critical, there's the reflection of that, which is then again reflected in like, I I discount like how much of childhood gets absorbed, absorbed in, and it's everything, like every component of it, every interaction I was taking in. I was taking in of my view of the world. And so in fucking more comfortable environments, there's still a fuckload of judgment. There's so, cuz like that's the only way it works. It's the only way it works. It's the only way that this society functions, is via judgment. Like, if that is the way that you are feeling better about yourself, if you are using an idea to feel better about yourself and there's that investment, like, it's going to be reflected in all different sorts of ways. If there's that idea, because as soon as you're divided, you have to feel better in some way, shape, or form. And that need is fucking vicious. It's vicious, and it runs into everything. And so you almost judge yourself, everyone else, blah, 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 by necessity, if that is what you're relying upon. And so the alternative is just the abandonment of the need to feel better. And then it's not about how you feel. And there's not this drive, there's not this standard all the time to meet up with. Because if I can, go into a situation, even today, I was like, holy fuck, this isn't a fucking test. There's no right way for this to go. There's not a good way for this to go. So, but if I'm maintaining like, but I want to keep feeling good throughout it, then I'm going to keep myself off from like fucking up or messing up or stumbling or falling. And like, if it's not about that, then there isn't even so much a concern. But as long as that's the case, if like stumbling and falling makes me feel worse. It's like there's going to be so much fucking hesitation and holding off from that and trying to maintain this fucking trying to maintain perfect in whatever way, or at least comfort or lack of discomfort. And it's kept me at fucking from, oh God, it's kept me from jumping in to everything I've ever not jumped into in my life.
I would reframe it as it has been the process of you jumping in.
Yeah, god damn. Like I have, because I have jumped in to things, but like, yeah, I guess it's just like I've tried what feels like all the ways. I've tried enough ways, I guess. That's just it. Enough ways, and realized that they don't work. And like that's been my, our whole life. If we're thinking it's a test, if we're thinking there's things to achieve, there's ways to feel better. We're gonna keep trying ways and keep bashing up against a wall. And then as we bash against one, we start looking around. It's like, there's no wall here. There's somewhere else. There's another thing to try. There's another box to jump into. This is just the wrong one. And so, you climb over it and jump into a different box until you realize, like, oh, the wall. What about this wall? Is this wall actually something I have to stare at or avoid or not look at? And maybe it's not. Maybe all those things that create this wall that keep me at bay, like, nah, I don't have to. I can see them and be like, yeah, okay. That's what the fucking wall is, whatever that means. And it doesn't have to mean something about me. And it's okay, whatever happens and whatever plays out.
Exactly. That's it. It's just remembering, like, the more you invest in the idea of you, the less you'll feel like yourself. That's pretty much it. And if you remember that, it really helps. Right. But it's funny because you were mentioning like 49%, 51%, and that reminded me of something. A year ago today, you and I did our community topics episode on personality tests. And we said at the time that we would return in a year and redo the test and discuss if there are any changes. And so later on today, I will find that test that we did last year, and we'll both tackle the link in our own free time, and then we'll record an episode about it. Maybe we'll cover it in tomorrow's Raw, a revisit to our personality test. But I'm very curious to see where that's going to go. But this has all been a great episode, but it really just comes down to, again, we create the box. We create the box because we think it's beneficial. And then we wonder why we feel cut off. We wonder why we feel anxious. We wonder why we feel like we need to compare and compete. It's because we feel cut off by the idea, by the box that we're investing in. So it's not that you shouldn't use the box, but don't sit in the box. Like, use it as a tool for language, for concepts, for all kinds of fun stuff. But don't think that you're the box. That's the trap, is that we put ourselves in there thinking that it keeps us secure and safe and defines us. And, well, if I'm valuable, it's all got to be in here. Look how much value is in this box. This is not the kind of value that can be measured. Therefore, it's not the kind of value that can be contained. The true reality of your existence is whatever the fuck you are when you're not thinking about it, which is everything in motion. But we just try to limit that. Because again, we want to know where it's going. We want to know how we feel about this. We want to know what it means about me. And the idea that it means nothing is only terrifying because we've invested in the idea of ourselves being the truth. Nope, that's going to make me happy. Never. Never going to make you happy. Not at the cost of something else. So just knowing that, just laugh it off. Use it, play with it, recognize the fucking game, and don't get so caught up in it that you actually think it's reality. It'd be like playing Monopoly with somebody and thinking it's so real that you actually start giving them your own money. You're like, oh, I owe you rent, and you start paying. It's like you're hurting yourself now just by taking this a little too seriously. And that's very much the point. We're hurting ourselves just by taking this a little too seriously.
So it's not even like getting rid of anything or overcoming anything. It's just I'm uh, we take it really seriously. I've taken it really goddamn seriously. And there's been a part of me that's almost assumed like there is something to get rid of. There is something to overcome. And like, god damn, dude, like fuck, I've definitely done that. I've definitely done a good like it's it's all or nothing sort of thing instead of allowing for a fluctuation. Fuck. And so I've like judged myself based on whether I'm fully not thinking about anything right now or I'm completely lost in it, as opposed to realizing that it's what it is. It's what it's oh god, it's nothing that I think that it is. Whatever I assume is going on or playing out or what this is or what I am or what everything is or what being everything is or isn't or not or this or that. Like it's all fucking conceptual. It's all fucking oh my god, like that whole the whole shebang of any thoughts because then it's like if it's conceptual, it means something about you as soon as it's conceptual, and you don't even get that. Because like, I've been in situations I was on a podcast yesterday, and, like, I was pretty baked, and, like, I don't even know how it went, dude. I felt like I blacked out, like, a couple times during it or just, like, mine went blank for a sec, and I'm like, "Shit, I think they just asked me a question, and I'm not really sure." Or just, like, answered a question they asked for, like, 3 ways that I, don't maintain a good high or something. And I was like, I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, there's so much to that question. Like, what even? I don't even know if I experience good highs. I'm just high and kind of all over the place and shambles a lot. So for me to give you 3 things and like it was so hard to not just like unload everything. And I got into like how because it was more of a casual podcast, like, it wasn't interview based, which I enjoyed almost how much of a tough time I can have in situations like that, and so I just, like, talked about that for a little bit, and I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I've taken myself really seriously throughout my life, so sometimes just, like, even joking around, like, on this podcast right now is I feel these sort of, like, hesitations and like self-doubt and stuff and whatnot. And then of course, like, and it just happened. And I'm like, I don't even know like how that went or turned out. Part of me is like, I don't have any idea if I said anything coherent at all. And then part of me is like, I think there was a decent back and forth, but it's like I'm not concerned about that, and yet I'll still maintain this, like, anticipatory or in the moment because I did let go a little bit more on that and, like, jumped in a little more to stuff, and so even that or, like, just a bit here and there, and then I didn't fucking judge myself after. It's like I've kept living my life, doing stuff, working on things, like, things don't hit in the same way that they used to necessarily, and so I'm starting to be like, "Well, fuck, if I just went into that, I'm like, I don't even know how it went or how I did." Like, that even that is, like, kinda jarring for me because part of me after shit like that, I'd be like, "Oh, I think it went pretty well." And, like, I feel good about that. And I've never known how it's oh, fuck. I've never known how it's gone. I've never known how it's gone one way or another. What that even fucking means. Oh, Jesus Christ. Like, oh, fuck, I have this fucking internal sort of barometer for situations at all times. That went well, that went poorly, that went this way, that went that way. Oh god, I've done that for, like, everything. Oh, Jesus Christ, like, fucking everything, dude, and I've never actually known. God.
That's the point, though, isn't it? Right? Is that we don't know. We make assumptions because because of how they make us feel. The alternative is freedom. The alternative is just to recognize you don't know. I don't know how this episode went, because for me to know how the episode went, I'd have to know the impact it has on everybody's life. I don't even know the impact it has on my life. So the whole point is just to keep going. Express yourself, because that's the only thing you know. The only thing that you know is how authentic you're being. That's it, because you can feel that if you're honest about it. But that's really the only spectrum of every moment. And you're honest when you're not trying to protect yourself, which means when you're not keeping track of every single thing you do. You know, stepping so carefully because of how it might be perceived. That's not honest. And so I go into these episodes. I went onto the podcast with Daisy and Sophie. I didn't remember what I said after the fact. I never remember what I say after the fact. There are times during this episode, during our own episodes, where I forget what I'm saying halfway through saying it. Where I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to keep talking. Hope this comes out. Right. And it's just because there's no sense of ownership over it anymore. It's not like I'm formulating it anymore. I'm just opening my mouth and expressing whatever it is that's going through. And because I'm expressing whatever it is that's going through in the same way that I would pay attention as I was having an insight, right? I'm not worried about remembering it after the fact. What's happening now is the point, right? It's not about later on going, oh, that was really good. I got to write that shit down. Oh, that's great. Right now is the point. This is where life is happening. This is where I'm actually being me. And there's no right way to do that. And there's no concept that you can live up to that's ever going to be the limitless nature that you are. That said, we're at 9:45 or 12:45, depending where you are. We're going to continue on Patreon in about 15 minutes. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew here, who I have to admit, man, it's great to hear you. It's so funny over the last 2 years, you've just become clearer and clearer and clearer as you get, I guess, closer to just accepting you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to be anything. You're just valuable the way you are. Just talk.
And I was as you were talking, I was so much easier for me to pay attention to what you were saying when I was like, "You're right, you know what? I can just open my mouth and see what comes out, and whatever happens, happens." And as I've started to do that, like, it's not as scary as I thought, and that's been the fear is like, "Oh, if I let go, anything could happen." And then I can just keep going and keep doing whatever, and I don't know what I'm saying right now, really, and it's scary. Like, admittedly, there's a big part that's scary because, like, this has been something I've been afraid of sort of in a lot of ways, and yet I do it
But
all.
there's nothing to defend.
No. Oh, and as soon as there is, it's like, but what? God damn, and that really is, like, yeah, fucking freedom is yeah, it's, like, different, but fucking exciting. So I'm gonna stop talking now because I know we're at time, but this has been fun. I appreciate everyone who's been in the chat and hopped in and fuck yeah, not talking for you, but,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And to our listener, you've wanted a good reason to join us on Patreon on Sundays. This is it. This is going to be a fucking great conversation after this for sure. And we've got 3 hours of it today. It's Sunday. So we've got a tier 2 call followed by a tier 3 call. So if you haven't joined us on Patreon yet, these are the kind of conversations that we do there. So we would love to see you. This is just a warm up. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.